Wine in moderation with family and friends around food, principally the dinner table, makes for just a wonderful lifestyle.
This podcast is sponsored by Release Winery. Join us as the story of this ultra-limited wine continues. Learn more at releasewinery.com.
Well, this is a long time in coming that I finally am here at Krug Winery with Peter Mondavi Jr., which is such a pleasure to meet you and pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me in.
Well, Ray, thank you for making the trip out here.
I just want to say right now we're in a tasting room with a chiller, I presume, behind you. And you have a couple of rooms like this, don't you?
Yeah, in fact, this is we call it our VSL, our Vintage Selection Library. Vintage Selection Cabernet is our flagship Cabernet. And behind me is, of course, temperature controlled, humidity controlled, example of the wine library that we have of all of our vintage selects, or most of our vintage selects going back to 1944, the first vintage.
For you growing up in the wine industry, was there a time you didn't want to be in the industry, or was it sort of a predetermined fact you're going to be in the business?
I think there's a couple things. I mean, first of all, when we were growing up as little kids, we really lived an isolated life here in Napa Valley. I'm talking about Napa Valley residents. It's, you
Sure.
didn't have the internet, things like that. There was a very rural agricultural community. Fine dining virtually didn't exist when I was a kid here. You wouldn't even recognize it, if you came back in that era. And we just kind of thought the world was, winery and vineyards and winemaking. There's one point in, I think it was high school, probably shouldn't admit this, but I thought winemaking was too complicated, so I started making beer. Of course, at underage, but
yeah, of course.
Just wanted to experiment with that. Briefly, I did go off to college to study, what I loved and what I can get through in college, which was mechanical engineering. But came straight back to the wine business and never looked back. And I've done a variety of things here in the business.
I imagine to some degree you might have been able to apply that degree to the work you do here.
Oh, absolutely. Quite a bit. Obviously in the production side of things.
Sure.
One big project I took on when I came back after graduation was really an extension of Dad's research that he did in his undergraduate days at university. And he did research with Professor Cruz at UC Berkeley on what are the effects of the temperature during the fermentation of wines, both whites and reds. Really determined that the colder you can ferment whites, the fresher, more vibrant, more expressive they'll be of the varietal characteristics. So I took that a step further and really computerized the temperature control and monitoring process of the fermentations so that you can get really a much finer degree of control of what Dad had researched back, I think it was about 1938 or so that he did that research. So that's how, the one example how the engineering background had helped. I came back here early 1980s, about 10 years later, I went off to business school, maybe with the idea of trying something else, but came back straight back here after the 2 years of business school.
Many people hear the name Mondavi, which they know very well, and then they see Krug Winery. Krug? That's not Mondavi, but that's Mondavi running it.
Yes.
So how did that happen?
So I'll just make it very succinct. Let's talk about Charles Krug, the namesake, the founder of Charles Krug Winery. He was a Prussian immigrant, nothing to do with the wine business, but well-educated. Came over to California in the mid-1800s and just started tinkering with ideas and stuff and wanted to get involved with agriculture. And he stumbled into grape growing and then the wine business and fell in love with wine business. Fell in love with Carolina Bale. And the reason I point that out is her family was a very prominent family in Northern California, owning significant land tracts here in Northern California. So they got married in December of 1860, Charles Krug and Carolina Bale. And her parents gave the newlyweds a dowry of about 600 acres of land here in the heart of Napa Valley. So as I say, Charles Krug married very well. And he pursued his love of winemaking that he had really embarked on a few years earlier, and established Charles Krug Winery here where we sit in Napa Valley in St Helena. In fact, we're in the Redwood Cellar, as we refer to it. Charles Krug built this. I think the first structure here, this building was 1874. But the winery was founded in 1861, oldest winery in Napa Valley. So that's how Charles Krug started the winery, the brand. So let's step over to my grandparents, Cesare and Rosa Mondavi. So they immigrated from Italy. They got married in Italy in 1908. Late, it was in December sometime, late in the year. My grandma was 18 years old, grandfather a couple years older. Their parents were sharecroppers, so very modest means, no winemaking experience whatsoever. So 2 weeks after their wedding, they jumped on their honeymoon cruise that landed on Ellis Island, so a pretty rustic crossing of the Atlantic. And from there, they immediately went up to northern Minnesota. Now, why there, especially in the middle of winter?
Of course they did, yeah. Curious about that, especially the winter part. Yeah.
Yes. So they went up there because they already had family and friends from their local town, village in Italy that already had immigrated to that part. That part is the Iron Range in northern Minnesota. So lots of work to be had in the iron mines. So they came over here. My grandfather toiled in the iron mines briefly, didn't like that, started a saloon with a partner. Prohibition kind of put the stops on that one. And then he parlayed that into a grocery store. And now there is a very small but very tight-knit community of Italians there. And the community rallied around my grandfather to send him out to California to secure wine grapes because he was dealing in fresh produce, being in the grocery store business. Sure. So he came to California, and a very well-respected business person in the community there. So negotiated some deals, and I believe it was 1919 he shipped out the first load of wine grapes to northern Minnesota for home winemaking. Mm-hmm. So all legal. A household could produce about 4 barrels of wine per year as long as they didn't sell it, consumed it at home. It was a legal endeavor. So he started that and built it up. And then it was 1922, he decided for the whole family to pick up roots and move to California to further this wine grape shipping business. Moved to Lodi, Central Valley, California, and built a very successful business of shipping fresh wine grapes, primarily Zinfandel, Carignan a little bit, Alicante was another variety, but mainly Zinfandel, to pretty much the northeast region of the United States. And as I like to say, if it weren't for Prohibition, I wouldn't be here talking about wine. I think Prohibition is really what introduced my grandparents to wine, to vineyards, to grapes, to winemaking. And then through that, and through their success, my grandparents, Cesare and Rosa, purchased Charles Krug Winery in 1943. So that's how we have the Charles Krug name associated with the family name, Mondavi. So let's fast forward a little bit. My dad, Peter, of course, I'm Junior, was running the winemaking side of it. My uncle, Robert Mondavi, was running the sales and marketing side of it. And then in 1966, my uncle Robert Mondavi split off from us and started Robert Mondavi just down the road a few miles from us with some partners. And at some point in the future, my dad bought out Robert's ownership of Charles Krug. So today, Charles Krug is exclusively owned by my dad's lineage. So myself, my brother Mark, we have 6 kids between our 2 families, 2 grandkids now, so we're working into the 5th generation. Now Robert, he split off, as I mentioned, went public, sold in 2004, so there's no family left at the Robert Mondavi Winery. However, his kids and grandkids went off and started other wine adventures, primarily here in Napa Valley. So as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. There's a small group of founders. I'm talking people from the post-Prohibition, 30s, 40s, 50s. That back then it was a very rustic business. Everyone kind of needed everyone to help each other. They were, from a technology standpoint, learning a lot and sharing a lot of information. We still share a lot of information today, but back then it was a very small, tight-knit group that got together on a regular basis, more informally than formally.
So your role in the company today is specifically?
So I do more strategic work, ambassador work. We have a great leadership team at the winery that takes care of day-to-day operations. My niece, Angelina, who's a consulting winemaker, has her own business and some wine brands. She is consulting for us at Charles Krug, so she has the family stamp influence, whatever you might say, on the vineyard and winemaking aspect for Charles Krug, which is very, very important. So, but I focus, like at the board level, longer term things, direction, and, talking up the wines, the history, and the family.
Like you are now.
Yes.
I imagine, though, over the years, you've done probably just about everything in the industry. Is that fair to say?
I've driven tractors in the field, sampled wines from the barrels, tasted, warehouse, loading trucks. Yes. pretty much A to Z in my, I think 40 plus years. 40 plus years working full time. But I started here, I think I was about 8 years old with my first paycheck. Summertime, when I'm off from school. 4 hours a day, not a full 8-hour day. Yeah. Just doing whatever, odd jobs, and it evolved, full lab analysis, things like that. So,
if you don't mind me asking too, and I'm curious, kind of you went down that path for a moment, did you have a relationship with Robert?
Yes. I mean, there was a rocky portion in that.
What family doesn't have a rocky portion?
It's well documented. But really, it was fascinating to watch Robert and Dad reunite again. And it really happened, I may get the year off, but it's 2004, 2005 when Robert sold his winery. So that competitive aspect of two brothers was put aside, and they got together and created a barrel. So half of Robert's wines and half of Dad's wines, Charles Krug wines, and a very successful auction lot at Auction
Napa. I didn't know that.
And they were getting together before that, and then they would continue to get together for lunches and stuff, just the two of them. I mean, they really talked about wine business. That's their primary focus, was talking about the wine business and wine styles, so on and so forth. As they got up in the years doing this in a restaurant, they're both of hard hearing aids. These two older gentlemen yelling at each other at the in a good way.
Yeah, right.
So they could hear each other in the restaurant.
Yeah. Peter, for the winery here, there are walk-in possibilities as well as appointments. Is that correct?
Yes, there are. We do appointments, but walk-ins are welcome as well. And we do have a series of different levels of tastings and engagement. Many people like the more enhanced engagements, about an hour and a half, could be longer. Yeah. That's what really people are into these days, is to go narrow and go deep. Yeah. So what I mean by that is when you come to Napa Valley, you hit 2, maybe 3 wineries in a day, 3 at most. Have a lunch in between. But you go deep into that 2 wineries you visit. You spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with them. And on weekends, we have offer pizzas for lunches. They're fantastic pizzas, wood-fired pizza oven out back. And I think, check it out, but it's depending on the time of the year, Thursday through Sundays typically. But it's a great way to break up the day.
For our listeners who would like to learn about you online, what is your website?
It's charleskrug.com.
Excellent. And you are not Charles Krug. You are Peter Mondavi Jr.
Yes.
Just to be clear on that.
Yes.
I think more people realize that than I realized. But Peter, this was indeed an honor to meet you and fun to chat with you. You're really easy to talk to. Thank you for your time.
Ray, thank you very much.